Today with Rick. Rick is gonna with
IPX, yeah.
IPX, yes, and he's gonna talk today about 1031 exchange. But first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and just how long you're in this industry? And we're gonna go over a couple important things about 1031 exchange. And I really want you to stay until the end because there'll be some good stuff at the end. So
Absolutely. Well, hey,
tell us
thanks
a
for
little bit
having me.
more.
Rick Woodstock with IPX 1031 Exchange. I've been in the industry for, I don't like dating myself, but a long time, over 25 plus years. And so I've been everything under real estate, a mortgage guy. I was a real estate and been focusing just on 1031 exchanges in the last 10 years. So I'm what they call an expert or a guru in the 1031 world.
I definitely believe that you know everything.
Oh, I don't know about that. That's a little bit too much, but we'll take it.
Okay, so let's start just from like a basics for
Sure.
people who are like me.
Right.
Not really like me, but yeah, most. So what is 1031 exchange and how exactly works?
Yeah,
So
so you're not alone because when it comes to 1031 exchange, a lot of people don't understand it completely. So 1031 exchange, in a nutshell, is that if you have real estate and you've had some significant gain on that property, you don't want to necessarily go and spend all that money that you earned and worked for and give it to Uncle Sam. So what a 1031 exchange does is it allows you to take whatever you had to normally pay for capital gains tax and you can defer it into a new property. So if you're willing to invest in more into real estate, this is the vehicle that can get you there for sure.
is that mostly that investors are doing or pretty much anybody
Well,
can?
there's investors that are dedicated investors,
Hmm.
and then there's the investor that becomes an investor out of default. And what I mean is that, you might have somebody that's located here in
Hmm.
Arizona and maybe they're in the military or they're in a different industry and they get transferred. So they move out of that primary residence, and when they move out of that primary residence, that now becomes an investment property if they hang on to that property. So if they rent that property out just for a small period of time, a year,
Hmm.
2 years, and that's now claimed on their taxes, they're an investor by default. So it's basically what 1031, who is allowed to use it or who it applies to is investors, but not so-called with the hat, I'm an investor, I buy hundreds of properties. It could be just one person or one property that they
Hmm.
own that they moved out of, rented out that property, or it could be a second home that they rent out the property when they're not using it.
Hmm.
Now that becomes an investment property, and then now they qualify for 1031 exchange, and then they're also now an investor.
Okay, and then we are in Arizona, but like what about other, like if they have properties in other states or like how that works?
Yeah, so where 1031 exchange got its name, it's part of the tax code.
Hmm.
So subsection 1031 is where it sits in the tax code.
Hmm.
So everybody just now just calls it a 1031 exchange. So it's a federal program. So anywhere in the United States, you can take your investment properties, sell those investment properties. Instead of paying capital gains tax, you can defer with a 1031 to
Hmm.
another state or within the same state, but anywhere in the United States.
But can you help people who are like,
I can facilitate an exchange anywhere in the United States,
oh,
and we do
that's
that quite often because it's not just one region. Most
hmm.
people they might keep all their investments in one region, but a
Hmm.
lot of times they might go from Arizona to Florida or to Texas and so on.
And I
Yeah.
think you mentioned that Arizona is becoming more popular. Is it any other states that you can see that people are or from
Where people are
where?
going with their
Yeah.
investments. It's all over the board. It just
Hmm.
depends on what type of investor you are. Residential, there's a little bit of guesswork, a little bit of looking into the market that they want to take that
Hmm.
property. A few years ago, everybody from California seemed like wanted to take their investments from California and then relocate them here to Arizona. Arizona was one of the top choices, but there's also Texas was in that mix. Florida was in that mix, and then some other states that you wouldn't think of, but like Ohio or other different states in the Midwest that people are moving their properties to. It really depends on what type of property it is. If
Hmm.
it's a single family,
Hmm.
maybe it's getting a little tired, a little bit old, has more maintenance on it,
Hmm.
and maybe they want to exchange into something that's a newer build. That was a lot of draw for Florida. A lot of people wanted to take their assets to Florida during COVID or just after COVID. And then now some of those are wanting to move those back to Arizona too. So there's a lot of reasons why people move their assets around, but the 1031 exchange is the best vehicle for that, because who wants to pay anywhere from 20 to 30% in capital gains tax? And if you want to put that in real numbers, $100,000 gain, that's $30,000 possibly you have to pay to Uncle Sam. It's much better to keep that in your pocket and use it to go buy the next property.
And I mean, I have a couple of questions for
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
So what will, from your perspective, what are the key benefits? I mean, definitely saving the money, right?
Right, right.
That's the main kind of thing,
Yeah.
but also,
What's the main benefit? Well, saving the capital gains.
okay.
And for investment strategies, this is a good vehicle too. I mean, I always talk about this one client where I won't say here. He started off with me about 10 years ago. He's 22 years old. And he saw some seminar on late night TV or saw it on the internet. It's like, I want to be a millionaire in real estate. So he started off with a small duplex, got the right connections. So he got to me somehow. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is a lot of people don't understand what their options are. He was new, didn't really understand, but he relied on his dad. His dad's like, talk to your our CPA, and the CPA contacted me, and it's like, here's a younger investor that wants to sell his duplex. He's making a few bucks on it, and he wants to exchange it so he has to pay the capital gains into another property. What he did was he went from one duplex into two duplexes. And then shortly after that, he went from two duplexes to four properties. And then those four properties went into two commercial properties. And then those one commercial property went into a few residential properties.
Does he sell it?
Yeah, so he's buying and holding, but he's not holding for a long term. Some of them he's buying and holding for a couple of years, and he's buying and holding for a year. And then he's taking that profit and then going to where the next market where he thinks that he's going to get the highest appreciation. So he's got properties now 10 years later that are everywhere from Florida to California and they're in between. And now he's in his 30s. And if you had to guess what his portfolio is worth, started at like 250 with that one duplex. Now he's up into a $30 million range. So definitely a good vehicle to use to keep growing that.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, that's definitely something that people wants to hear, I'm sure.
I'm sure they do. Yeah.
Any potential risk or downsides of 1031?
Yeah, so I mean, it's the downside that a lot of people see when they research on 1031 exchanges is the time frame. So when you open up an exchange, if you Google it and you say, oh, what's a 1031 exchange? You're like, you got 45 days to identify or find that replacement property. Then you have a total 180 days to close. So 180 days doesn't spook too many people, but that 45 days, a lot of times I get that question. It's like, is that enough time for me to find my replacement property? Do I need to be in contract in that 45 days? So the answer is that could be stressful, and sometimes they don't find that replacement property in that 45 days. We at IPX are there to help them find that property. Not that we're going to go say, here's a bunch of listings, but we work with qualified real estate agents like yourself that can help them find that property within that time frame. And then also, can you get more time than 45 days? That's where it comes into just using common sense, and having a good real estate agent can help you with that. So when you sell your relinquished property, your investment property, that property, instead of doing a 30 or 2-week closing or a real quick closing, and it's an investment property, they're going to do an exchange, push out that closing a little bit, maybe a 45, 60-day close. And of course, that time can be used to start looking for that replacement property.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the client is closing or at least under contract in that 45 days. But like you say, for a downside or something that would be a deterrent for exchange, is the pressure on that 45 days.
Yeah, but as you said, it's a little bit with a little time management and a little negotiation on that timing. I don't see that. Is it any penalty in case if they don't find it?
Right. No. So there's not. So the biggest thing is that you have to have the exchange set up if it's an option, and it has to be set up before close of escrow. That's the biggest thing that could be a problem. So sold an investment property and you're at escrow and you didn't set up an exchange and you collect that funds, you're in a taxable event, you have to pay capital gains tax. But setting it up before that happens with the exchange, so the funds go to QI, Qualified Intermediary, or 1031 company, we hold those funds. Now you got that option to find that replacement property. If you don't, worst case scenario is we return the funds back to you and you pay your capital gains tax. So there's no penalty for doing this. If anything, it will buy you that 45 days to open up an exchange to go see if you can go find that replacement property. And we have a very high successful rate on once the exchange is open on that they do find that replacement property. Again, working with the right people.
That's great. Oh yeah, that doesn't seem like something too scary or impossible.
Right.
Or
no.
like risky, you know.
Right.
I don't really
it
see
just,
that.
It depending on how they view it.
I mean, it depends on the market too, I guess. But I think that I know investors are usually looking for deals.
Well, of course.
But they can find something for sure. I mean,
right. Yeah.
Might not be the best deal.
It may not be their first pick. Sometimes
still...
it might be their second pick. But like we were saying earlier, use the time before to get out there.
Kind of plan it.
Exactly.
Perfect. And then, so any kind of specific properties that could qualify for 1031 exchange?
Everything that's a real property. So that could be anything from like a cell phone tower that has an easement that the property is attached to multi-million-dollar commercial property.
Oh,
so
wow.
anything that's real property qualifies for a 1031 exchange.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And can you do exchange between residential and commercial or vice versa?
I'm glad you brought that up because that is something that a lot of people get afraid of when it comes to 1031 exchange. They go online and they see that, oh, I qualified not to pay this capital gains tax by just buying like kind. And like kind, for a lot of people, they see that like kind. They're selling a condo residential. So that means that they might have to buy a condo residential. That's not true. So the IRS is a little bit tricky when they wrote the tax code and said that like kind. Like kind is real property for real property. So you can go from residential to commercial or raw land or all in between. So as long as it's real property and you're buying the same dollar amount or greater, you're qualified for 1031 exchange. So that's everything. That's real property.
That's really neat that they allowed you to do that. Vacation rental, second homes are
second home vacation homes are a little unique because there is a little bit more guidance with that. So if it's an exclusive second home that you don't let anybody in, you're afraid to rent out that property on the weekend because there's people sleeping in your bed. People get a little weird about that. They do not qualify. So the IRS is like, well, if you own a second home vacation home for your exclusive use, you can afford to pay the capital gains tax, unfortunately. But with just a little bit of planning, you can take that second home vacation home, rent it out when you're not using it, claim it on your taxes.
Like Airbnb or?
Like an Airbnb, short-term rental. Nobody wants those next door to you because you're afraid of the parties, but short-term rentals, VRBOs, the Airbnbs are very good for investment properties to make that second home now qualify for 1031 exchange, makes it an investment property. So there is requirements on it. There's a minimum requirement that you have to rent it, which is 14 days. And then there's a minimum requirement on the other end on how much you can use it. But if it's a property that you're thinking about selling.
So you have to rent, I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So the minimum time that you have to rent to qualify that property as an investment property is 14 calendar days a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, but there is some restrictions on the other end.
Okay.
So
what's the
14? So whatever you rent it is what you have to, minimum rent is 14 days. So if you do minimum 14, you have to rent it, live in it, or only use it for 14 days for personal use. 10% of the time. So the more you rent it, so there's two things I just said there. You have to rent it for 14 days a year, claim it on your taxes.
Okay.
Minimal, you're going to be limited on how much you can personally use that second home for yourself now is 14 days. But if you rent it out more than 14 days, then it's 10% of the time that you rent it that you can use it. So it's a little bit of math involved there a little bit. So you might have a client that there are snowbirds here in Arizona. We have lots of snowbirds here and some other parts of the country that as well. But when you now think that this property is, you're outgrown it, you're not using it as much, you want to sell it, maybe go from Florida to Arizona or whatever the case may be, and you're not using it very much at all, that 14-day minimum, and then you limit it on how much you can use it, might work. But now, if this is a property you love to go to 9 months of the year, it may not work to use it as an investment property. But it gets down to the details. So if it is a property that your client or somebody's looking to see if it qualifies for 1031 exchange, give us a call.
Definitely, because it's a little.
It could be a little bit more. It's a unique situation, but like I say, the minimum is only 14 days. We can all achieve that, but there is some restrictions on how much personal use you can use it for that taxation year.
But I don't understand. How they know like how long you're gonna like how
they gonna know?
Yeah.
That's the question that we always give. How will the IRS know what we're actually doing? They only time that they know, and we don't like to say.
Is this an okay question to ask?
Yes, it's a very good okay question.
Is it legal?
Yes, that's 100% legal.
Yeah.
But the only way that the IRS knows you're doing something you're not supposed to do is it's a curse word. It's called an audit. So you want to abide by the rules as much as possible and get guidance from your CPA, your tax advisor. Those are your first go-to people that say, hey, is this legal? Is this okay? Like you said,
they could check electricity, but I don't know. I'm just trying to how they can.
Worst case scenario. If you're doing it honestly and you're renting it out the minimums and you know what the law is and your CPA is okay with that, or your tax advisor is okay with that, you're going to be okay. Now,
so just do it right way, and you should be okay.
Right. But
I get it.
Absolutely. Keep good records of everything you do and make sure that you're doing it properly.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking.
But no, the IRS doesn't necessarily knock on every door and make sure that your tax return is correct. Yeah, but if it doesn't look.
Yeah, if it's too.
Red flags.
I get it.
Yeah, we don't want to mess with those guys.
I just want to be sure.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So about the timeline, that we already talked about the 45-day identification period, but we can can you get extension on the closing actually?
Yes, but unfortunately it'd have to be a natural disaster that happens. So there's no official extension for an exchange. So it starts at the close of escrow. That's your day 0. You got 45 days and then a total of 180 days. So these are.
So 45 is included in that?
No, so it's concurrent. So you got from close of escrow. So we close on. I don't want to date this video, but we close at the first day of the month. That's your day 0, and then you have 45 days from that day 0 to identify. Total from that close of escrow, you have 180 days. Now a lot of people hear 180 days and says, "Oh, that's 6 months." Well, it's calendar days, so it's not business days. So it may be 6 months, might be a little short, maybe a little late, depending on when the property closes.
Okay. Well, if you have any questions, please.
Yeah.
Rick, you'll leave your information. We'll have actually below everything how to get to you and how to best way to contact. So we talk about actually tax benefits of 1031 exchange.
Right.
And how much kind of potentially you can save, just like kind of.
Oh yeah. Well, let's start off with our neighboring state of California. So there's federal, and this is what the taxes are currently. Federally, you're going to pay anywhere from 15 to 20%, depending on your tax income bracket that year. So 15 to 20, who decides that? That's going to be their tax advisor. So now you got 15%, and then you have state capital gains tax. Not all states have capital gains tax. Arizona has capital gains tax. We're approximately 5%. So you got minimum 15 federal, and then you got 5% state, which you're at 20%. If you made $100,000 on a sale, $20,000 is minimum that you would have to pay to the IRS on that side. There's another little thing that they call depreciation recapture. So when that property where you have it as a rental for about 5 years, we'll say, every year when you do your Schedule C or Schedule E, you're filing your taxes, one of the biggest benefits is that you get that depreciation deduction. So it helps offset, if you're a W-2 employee, that you can offset your investments on your taxes. When you go to sell that property, there's another tax that's due, and it's 25% recapture of depreciation. So that's a
What does
number.
that mean?
That means that that number that you've taken for depreciation. So depreciation is going to be on the dwelling on the property.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be the land, of course. That's millions and millions of years old. But that dwelling that's on the property might, well, it will, it starts to wear,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the IRS is familiar with that it's going to wear and it's going to be a cost involved with that. And so they allow you to take 25%, or not 25%, they allow you to take a percentage of depreciation on your taxes every year, depending on what the value that you bought that property for.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that for 20 some odd years. Where you go to sell it, so you may say took $100,000 depreciation. Now they want 25% of that recapture, and they want that as a tax because they gave it as a benefit to you over the years on your taxes, and then they want to claw back 25% of it when you sell it. The good news is when you do a 1031 exchange, that 15, that 5, that 25% depreciation, all those taxes get deferred in the 1031 exchange. So you don't have to pay them. So it's a big, huge incentive for the investor that's like, oh, I don't have to pay $30,000, $40,000. I can take that $30,000, $40,000 that I would have had to pay to the IRS or Uncle Sam, and I can use it and leverage to buy new properties. That's going to make the cash flow better. So long
It's a
verbiage
lot
way.
of money,
Yeah,
probably. Yeah. So
absolutely.
especially with the prices.
And then what I was going to say, because I started
Everything.
off with California. California is a higher capital gains state tax. So that's minimum 15%, could be 20% federally, and then you could pay another 13.3 on top of that if you're in the state of California. So that sometimes influences where people take their investment properties, is what the state capital gains tax is in that state, or is there any at all? Because some states don't even have that as well.
Interesting.
It's a lot to learn, I know. A lot
Lots of information. So
Yeah.
we don't want to know everything. That's the reason we have you.
Right,
So we're just
right.
kind of talking, chatting.
Absolutely.
So what happens if my new property is worth less than my original property?
Okay. So good question, because a lot of people don't, like I said earlier, like kind is not just residential for residential. It could be residential for commercial or raw land. So really what like kind for 1031 purposes is that it's a dollar amount. So you got to buy real property. So it can be residential, commercial, raw land, but it's going to be a dollar amount. So we'll give an example. You just sold your client's property for $500,000. They want to do an exchange as an investment property. So that $500,000 gross sales price, what they can deduct for that for 1031 purposes is commissions and closing costs, which will bring them, we'll say average, or we'll give an estimate of $480. So that's your net sales price, that $480, because they're not going to tax you on commissions and closing costs. Good news for realtors, right? And everybody else, that's all tax money or fees that are not going to be taxed. So you got $480,000. So that's your magic number to buy the new property. Doing a 1031 exchange, you have to buy at least $480 or greater. But your question was, can you do less? And yes, you can do less. And we call it a partial exchange. So say instead of buying property for $480, you want to buy a property for $450. Great. You can still qualify for 1031 exchange, because now you're doing an exchange for, instead of $480, you're buying a partial. And what happens to that extra $30,000? It's going to go in your pocket, and they have a little word for that. They call it boot, BOOT. So that's taxable boot. So you're doing a partial exchange. You're deferring majority of the exchange with the 1031 exchange funds into the new property. You got that little leftover $30,000. You just have to pay capital gains tax on that $30,000. So if the numbers make sense, that's going to be okay.
When you say if the numbers make sense, you mean in what?
Yes, I love it. You're calling me on everything. So that's
Sorry.
good. No, sorry. That's absolutely, because that's questions that people will have, right? So what is the magic number? It's going to be different for everybody. So in that example, that $500,000 sale, if they just bought 2 years ago and they bought it for $450, well, their gain is $50,000 roughly, right? So buying another property for $450 may not be worth doing the exchange, and we're happy to have that conversation along with their tax advisor. But if they bought it 10 years ago for $300,000, partial exchange might make sense. So that same $500,000 property is not going to be the exact same for everybody. It's going to depend on what they bought it for, and what they're
Mhm.
selling it for, and if it makes
So
sense on
there's
that.
lots of ifs.
Yeah, I mean, I can get into the whole
Yeah.
tax
So
geekiness
yeah,
thing, but
but
for
it's
surface,
good that
that's it.
everything is possible. It's just kind of you have to find what's
You
best
need to
for
talk.
you.
I mean, if anything out of this whole interview is most important is to talk to the right people, even before you decide to list the property, so that you got that
Mhm.
information, so you can make an educational decision on what you're going to do.
So for example, when you find, you're in the process and you kind of identify the property,
Yeah.
do you have to approve it? Like kind of,
Do
or
we as QIs have to approve it?
yeah, like
No,
do
no.
you how we can be sure that, that's the right, is just the price or like what?
We will. We a lot of that is going to
Mhm.
be.
I mean, do I have to kind of, or the investor has to come and say, hey, I found this home, would this
All
work?
we need from
Mhm.
1031 perspective is we just need a property address
Mhm.
or a sales contract or a parcel number or an
Mhm.
MLS number.
Mhm.
So they're officially identifying it with the QI, us, our company, and they have to do that within 45 days. So we timestamp it that it came in on day 44 at
Mhm.
9 o'clock. Whatever that timestamp is, we identify that. Now, do we go back and look? So, because there's a couple ways to identify. There's the 3 property rule. So you identify up to 3 properties. And then there's the 200% rule. But let's start with the 3 property rule.
Mhm.
3 property rule is probably the most commonly used, especially in residential. So what we do and look at when we get properties that are identified in exchange is under the 3 property rule is we make sure it's 3 or less. And then we make sure that it's a real property. And that's at the extent that we go. The one can be 100,000, one can be 100 million.
Mhm.
Excuse me, it doesn't matter as far as under the 3 property rule. If we jump into the 200% rule, then we have keep it under. I'm going to start coughing here for a second. Can we
Do you
pause
want
it
some
for a second?
water? Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to grab water here as we're filming, and we'll probably edit this part out.
We can take this out and take a little break.
It's all done in post, right?
Mm. I'm sorry, we are almost done.
Yeah, no, but I got to say the next part. I'm running out of. Okay, so we'll just. I'll put that down, make it look like we were before. Okay, so
you're good.
Well, thank you. So we got the 3 property rule. So that's where we're going to be concerned about is that we find 3 properties and that they're real property and keep that under there so that when their exchange is going to be successfully accepted with the IRS. And then there's the other rule that a lot of people get confused about. It's called the 200% rule. So we jump back to that $500,000 sale that you just brought in for investor. That $500,000 now doubles for identification purposes, up to $1 million. So now the client, the exchanger, can come in and identify up to $2 million worth of properties. So we as QIs, qualified intermediaries, we look at that list that the client's coming in identifying that it's under $2 million fair market value for it to qualify for the IRS. So along this process, we're QI, we are, not everybody, we can't say everybody, but for the industry average, they will come in and say, look, the 3 property rule, you're great. You got 3 properties, you can pick from one of those 3. The 200% rule is a little bit more complicated because we have to see what the fair market values are, and we got to do some math to make sure it's under 2 times the gross sales price. And if for some reason they're over any one of those, they came in with 4 properties and they're over the 200% rule, we're going to let our clients know that. And hopefully it's not a rush at the last 11th hour at 45 days midnight. But we will say, look, this is not going to work. You need to revisit this and then adjust some of those numbers.
But do you suggest to, I guess, talk to you before you kind of go under contract?
Once your exchange is open with IPX, we're going to have communication with you throughout the process, and we're available for any questions so that make this sound easier than it really is. So we make it that we're, hey, I found 123 Main Street. I want to identify with you guys. We do that. And if the next one comes in, okay, we're good. And then the next one comes in, we're good. And then the 4th one comes in, you may want to rethink that one or take the number 1 out because it's going to bring you over and above. So this conversation is going to be naturally formed with the client through us.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, not a problem.
So another question is is it possible to reverse or improve
improvement exchanges?
How that works?
Wow, good question, because that's very relatable to now what we're doing. So with the current market, there's a lot of investors out there hedging what's going to happen in the market, right? I'm sure some of your clients are like, is it a good time to buy? Is it not a good time to buy?
I don't
And
know.
there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes with that.
Mixed emotions, yeah.
Mixed
And,
emotions,
yeah.
right? And some areas of the United States are more positive than others. Some markets within the market is more positive than others. So that's kind of where that comes into play, the reverse exchange. So what the reverse exchange is, it's a little bit more pricey than a normal forward exchange or delayed exchange, but it gives you that peace of mind. So what happens in reverse is just literally everything we just spoke about is backwards. So now you buy that replacement property up front, and then you have 180 days to sell your current property, which we call the relinquished property. Mm-hmm. So that 45-day window of stress that some people have goes away, because now you're buying the property up front, and then you have 180 days to sell your current property. Pretty doable, right? Or at least it sounds like it's pretty doable.
Yeah.
It comes at a cost. Their normal exchange industry standards around $1,000, $1,200 to do a normal exchange. To do reverse type exchange, they start around $5,000, $6,000.
Oh, okay.
And so there's some, and because it's a more complicated exchange, I don't know if we have enough time to get into too mechanics of it, but the gist of it is, you buy it up front, we park that property under an entity, we call that an EAT, and then we hold that entity until you sell your current property, and then we do the exchange.
Is it also some time limit on?
It's limited to 180 days. So that's where you buy the property up front, and gives you that peace of mind that you can sell your property within 180 days. Now, the other one that you mentioned was the improvement exchange. Same type of thing, but you have 180 days. So in that example, say that $500,000 transaction again, they found a property for $400,000, but that property needs $100,000 worth of work. This is where the reverse improvement exchange would come in, because you have to buy. Remember, you have to buy at least $480,000 or $500,000 to be full exchange. So what you could do in this reverse improvement exchange is you could sell your property, do the reverse structure, buy this $400,000, we park it, and then we give you the remainder of the exchange up to 180 days to do all the fixing up and repairs of the property with that $100,000 that we're holding in the exchange. So then we can disperse it for improvements that you're doing on the property, a new pool or new kitchen or new roof or a new addition or whatever the case is. You can use those tax deferred funds to do those improvements within the 180 days. Super popular right now, because a lot of people don't want to just go, well, I can't find anything, and everything I'm out in the market looking at needs work. Where am I going to come up with that? I got to go get a loan, right? We all know what interest rates are right now. So this is a way that they can use their own current money, not have to pay capital gains tax on it, and then they can fix up the property. So then now, at the end of the exchange, the value of that property, it may be $500,000, might even be more, but it's going to make them qualify buying the same dollar amount or greater.
So they get the money to...
We hold the money,
you hold the money,
but they have full access to it to go towards that replacement property.
It's like a hard loan money, but you don't pay.
Sort of. It's their own money, but like, so when the exchange is open, we put it in what we call an exchange account. So those funds are there. They're taking $400,000 of it to buy the property that needs to be fixed up, and then we still hang on to that $100,000 in the exchange. These are rough numbers. And then as they get invoices for that improvements, they'll call my office, email my office. I need another 10 grand to do this. I need 20 grand for this, and then those funds get send a check or a wire to that contractor to do that work.
And that costs more. That same as like a reverse or...
Yeah, that is the reverse. That's like the reverse, but this one's just the reverse improvement.
Okay.
So,
but it's more money.
Yes, tax-free money.
I mean, do they pay more fees?
They pay that flat fee for doing that type of exchange around the $5,000 to $6,000 range. Yeah.
So that's kind of
right. Yeah. So, but it does give you more options on that side of it.
Perfect. I think we went through lots
of
stuff.
We have that big cliffhanger at the end that you said you promised them. Remember?
Oh yeah. Well, hold on a second. Well, I'm not even sure about this question. I mean, maybe you can help me. Is this real or?
Yeah. No, that's a very good question. So the question that you have there, it's worded a little bit weird there.
For you.
Well, it's very good, because that's a very good closer, because your clients are going to do the same thing that everybody else is going to do. They're going to probably Google if they don't have anybody referring them to somebody like me. They're going to Google what a 1031 exchange is, and then they're going to Google who should I use for a 1031 exchange. The unfortunate part is
right.
that's a very good. That's a very good question, because what sets us apart from every other QI out there is our financial strength. So we have we're overinsured on every exchange. So our industry is not regulated. So that means that anybody can just go off and be a qualified intermediary or a 1031 company.
The issue, yeah, that's scary.
That's right. So you might Google and say, "Oh, Rick at IPX is charging $1,000." Yeah. I found somebody I can do it for $600 or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that money that they're holding for your client going to be there when they find that replacement property? So at IPX, we can. And we put that in writing because we have a $100 million fidelity bond. We have a $30 million guarantee bond. We have E&O insurance, and we're financially backed. So not everyone in my industry can say that because we're self-regulated. And being us self-regulated with those guarantees means that if we put the funds into a bank, there was, I don't like to mention banks, but I think they're gone now. Silicon Valley Bank, that happened about a year ago, where that bank just went belly up. So if you worked with a small qualified intermediary company and they had your funds held at that bank, that funds could be at risk that they're going to be there for when they need it. And the IRS's stance on this is you do your due diligence to find the right company to work with. If you want to save $300 to go with this guy versus this bigger company that's going to back the funds, is $300 worth losing $100,000 or $200,000 or $500,000, whatever that QI is holding? And hopefully the answer is no, that's not worth the $300 savings on the fee. So that's very important. That's a very good question. That's probably the best one out of all of this, because who you work with and who's going to guarantee those funds are there when you buy your replacement property is very important. And everything I'm saying here, backed by insurance and backed by IPX, and we put all that in writing.
Well, that's the reason we pick the right people always.
Yeah, it's good to have that.
A really good referrals about you, and that's how I actually,
that's how we all came here today, right?
And then thank you so much for everything. That was amazing. And do you have any do you know any upcoming changes in regarding
well, if we watch the news on Washington right now, it's changing by the minute.
I don't watch the news.
No, don't do. Good call. Don't watch the news. But no, there's nothing on the radar as far as Washington is saying right now.
Make it,
yeah, there was some with the our past administration. They had some things on their budget that they were going to change with 1031 exchange. But fingers crossed, because it's a great tool for investors and real estate agents, the 1031 exchange. So nothing on the radar now, but not to say that that's down the line might change. But we can keep you up to date on that stuff if it does change.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and
nice to meet you in person. It was nice to meet you too as well.
Well, thank you all, and we'll see you again next episode. We can take it out, Dad.
And out.
All right.
Yeah.